Morning, everyone. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this information session. We will begin in a few minutes. In the meantime, please note that simultaneous interpretation is available in English, Spanish, and French. And to access this service, click in the interpretation icon of the bottom bar of your Zoom screen and select your preferred language. And please also be advised that this session is being recorded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angelica, and welcome to everybody on the call. We acknowledge that the invitation was a bit on short notice, but we also know that there is, for quite a few of us, there is travel and meetings coming up in the next few weeks, so we didn't want to postpone. And for those among us, that is mostly the OCM Steering Group, Executive Group, and Working Group members that were not able to attend today, we will have a recording of this meeting, which we will then share with them. I mean, the idea is that we know that we've been silent for a while, so we wanted to take this moment to provide you with an update, to provide some room also for people that may have questions to bring forward those questions, and to also introduce the team of consultants that we've been able to mobilize now in support of the implementation of the OCM work program. So once again, thanks to all of you for connecting, and I think I will enter into the meeting, and for doing that, I will pull up my slides. I think people should be able to see my slides now. Can I get a quick confirmation that's indeed the case?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So what do we want to do today? We wanted to provide this information session for the members of the Ocean Coordination and Steering Group, Executive Group, and Working Groups on the implementation of the OCM work program. So what we would present today is the phasing and the timeline for the implementation of the activities under the OCM work program, the expected outputs, a little bit detail on the expected outputs. Then we would briefly touch upon the advances to date, and we would look into the planned activities for the June-September period this year. I mean, not just June-September. We would zoom into June-September, but we would also briefly highlight what comes after that, correct? And then, as I already said, we would introduce the team of consultants, their respective work plans, and then we would also have a brief opportunity to talk about how we would engage stakeholders in the process. So, having had a look at the participants list, I know that most of you would be familiar with the OCM, with the key elements of the OCM work program, as they were endorsed last year by the Ocean Coordination and Steering Group. You will all recall that the idea is that we come up with a new regional blue economy strategic action program or a similar strategizing planning instrument, that this would be inspired by a state of the marine environment and associated socioeconomics report, which would actually be a first edition under a periodic reporting mechanism that we would seek to institutionalize through the OCM and through its members. And in that same context, we would also be working towards the development and region-wide adoption of a blueprint that would serve and that would guide the building out of a regional marine data and information infrastructure. And we had also seen that in order to start working on these outputs, we would first want to do an analysis of how these things have been done in the past, both in our region and elsewhere, so that we can extract lessons learned and best practices. We would also want to see who else may be doing similar stuff so that we avoid producing overlap, but that we can rather integrate everything that happens in the region under a unified ocean governance agenda. And this baseline analysis would apply both with regard to then defining the way forward for the SOMI and the SAP, as well as for the MDI blueprint. You all recall that the OCM was fully operationalized last year. We established the steering group, that's the countries. We established the executive group, that's the IGOs. Our project unit was confirmed as the Secretariat for the mechanism. And then in the last quarter of last year, we were able to operationalize 4 OCM working groups that would be supporting the development of the different elements under the work program that I had just shown. We also understood that the working groups, considering that working group members are in the working groups on a voluntary basis, they can do not the heavy lifting. They can support, but they cannot do the bulk of the work. And that's why with funds from ProCaribe Plus, we had decided that we would hire consultants to support the implementation and the achievement of the outputs under the OCM work program. To the left in the slide, you see what is now that the arrangements under the Ocean Coordination Mechanism, but we acknowledge that in our region and beyond our region, we also have a lot of stakeholders that can be of great aid in the pursuit of these outputs under the OCM work program, or people conducting work that we definitely need to consider if we are to avoid overlap and rather establish synergies. So we can see here that these consultants that we have now brought on board, they would need to liaise, they would need to get inputs and then request feedback, both from the working group members, the secretariat, the executive group, and the steering group, but they would also need to liaise with external stakeholders to gather the information that they would need to then produce their outputs. So if I quickly give it a briefing on some of the things that have happened this year so far, I will only focus on what is highlighted in yellow here to the left. So as you may recall, several of you were actually at that second joint meeting of the OCM working groups. And at that second joint meeting of the working groups, we had proposed to use a two-phased approach to the OCM work program implementation. And that actually was based on a presentation or a proposed Gantt chart, of which you can see a screenshot to the right in the slide. The screenshot is probably too small to read, but what can I indicate? As we were suggesting that two-phased approach, we were suggesting that that first phase, which was the baseline analysis, we would seek to close that first phase during the third quarter of this year. That means by August, September. Quite ambitious, but let us see how we're doing. I mean, at least we're making reasonable progress. So we had set forward that we would seek to conclude the baseline analysis and the proposal and the adoption of the way forward, which would then allow us to actually start phase 2 after that, phase 2 being the development of the SOMI, the SAP, and the blueprint. So the blueprint, actually, we're already advancing it. So we were seeking to close that phase 1 during the third quarter. And we would do that with a meeting of the executive group in late August and a meeting of the steering group in late September, where the proposed way forward would then be endorsed or adopted. To do that, we had evaluated the options of a procurement process where we would bring on board a company. We had considered that a procurement process would take a lot of time, so we decided to opt instead for a desk review recruitment process to bring consultants on board, individual consultants. When we had the working group meeting, we had set forward that we would seek to complete that recruitment process between February and March. And actually, indeed, I think by end March or by mid-March already, we had the first consultant on board. And then by the end of March, if I'm not mistaken, we had the second consultant on board as well, meaning that starting April, the work could quickly start to acquire some pace. So I think probably this slide I can skip. This is again representing the two-phased approach. What is with the green bar to the left is the phase 1, the baseline review and the defining of a way forward. And the blue are the deliverables that we would seek to produce during phase 2. This is the timing again. You can see we have already put there tentatively the dates for the second meeting of the executive group, where we would present the results from the independent reviews. The executive group, we expect then would provide some feedback and formulate recommendations. We would incorporate that in our proposal and take the proposals to the steering group, the countries, which we believe would have their meeting towards the end of September. So in terms of these two major events this year, we think that we would have the executive group meeting the last week of August. We're thinking of potentially having that meeting back to back with a workshop from the Cartagena Convention on the state of the convention error reporting, precisely because of that synergy and complementarity that we would be seeking between SOMI and SOCAR. We anticipate, this is to be confirmed by the baseline analysis, of course, but we anticipate that SOCAR will be a key building block of the SOMI. So we think that trying to schedule these two meetings back to back could make a lot of sense. And as already indicated, the idea would be that executive group members, IGOs, can review the work of the consultants, formulate their suggestions, and then all of this is taken to the meeting of the steering group towards the end of September. And there we would seek to have that meeting back to back with the intergovernmental meeting of IO-CARIBA of the IOC of UNESCO, which we also believe makes a lot of sense, because then again, we can also pursue these synergies between the work of IO-CARIBA, another Ocean Coordination Mechanism group member, and the Ocean Coordination Mechanism itself. I'm very happy to be able to introduce today, some of you may already have been contacted by our consultants, but I'm very happy to be able to introduce today Segundo Coelho and his team, who will be working on phase one, the baseline and the methodology for the TDA SAP. I think Segundo can probably open up his camera now, or he can do it when it will be his turn to actually speak during the session. And then, of course, we also have Lucy Scott, who has been assigned to work on the SOMI outline, table of content, and on the NDI blueprint. And I think that when I come to give the floor to both Segundo and Lucy, they can also probably briefly introduce themselves and talk about the prior experience they have and how they believe it will be of help for what we try to achieve here. Very quickly, the Cartagena Convention at its last COP had decided or had requested the Secretariat to move forward already with the development of the SOCAR, the State of the Convention Error Report. And it had requested also for the Secretariat to liaise with the Ocean Coordination, with the ProCaribe Plus project, to work on those synergies, because actually under ProCaribe Plus, we do have budget to support the development of SOCAR as a building block for SOMI. We know that we haven't fully finalized and adopted the way forward, but also if we do everything in sequence, it may take us too much time and we may not have substantive results by the time that the ProCaribe Plus project ends. So because of that, we felt that it was safe to already advance some of the work on SOCAR while we are fine-tuning the proposal that we then take to the executive group and the steering group. We perceive that to be a low-risk approach, because in the end, the Cartagena Convention has autonomy in determining what goes in SOCAR, and we do anticipate that it's going to be a building block for SOMI, so we felt it was safe to already start working with them and see how we can actually advance some of the work. In this context, the Cartagena Convention has activated a SOCAR, integrated SOCAR reporting subgroup, and we've been sitting in on these meetings of the subgroup, and we have started working with them. Maybe very quickly announcing also that next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, we have the project board meeting of the ProCaribe Plus project. Now you know that ProCaribe Plus and the OCM are not the same. ProCaribe Plus is time-bound and the OCM is meant to continue in time, but we also do know that the financing for the activities of the OCM currently come from the ProCaribe Plus project. So I just wanted to quickly also give this update. Next week, we will seek approval of a decision by the project board that relates to the OCM work program, and that includes an agreement that we further look with the Cartagena Convention in providing them with budget so that they can advance SOCAR development, but again, SOCAR as a building block for SOMI. Now, very important, we've been talking about what we have been doing, but we have not engaged you substantively in that process yet. And that is what we want to change in moving forward. So that's why today we have this virtual information session. And we also wanted to make use of the session to inform that stakeholder consultations have been initiated in the past few weeks. So our consultants have been reaching out to stakeholders, but they will be intensifying this process in the coming weeks and months. And many of you will be requested to engage in interviews or to respond to questions from our consultants. So this would be happening in the next few months. Then our idea would be that as our consultants may liaise with you steering group members, executive group members, working group members more individually, bilaterally, then the findings that they gather from that exercise, they would seek to take it to a joint meeting of the OCM working groups, which would most likely be a virtual meeting. And we are aiming to have that meeting towards the end of July. Also there, the SOCAR working group would also have their monthly meeting towards the end of July. So also there we would try and see if we can have synergies, trying to have both meetings back to back. And then based on that, and I think now I may end up repeating myself a little bit, we would have the August executive group meeting, and then we would have the September steering group meeting. And if all goes well, then we would be able to kickstart phase 2 during Q4 of this year. This is just a slide to quickly show how we are trying to align our own timeline with the timeline that our colleagues at the Cartagena Convention Secretariat have in mind in terms of the development of the integrated SOCAR. I wouldn't stand still on this now because I think most of what's in the slide I would already have kind of mentioned. But of course, the PowerPoint will be available to all of you for further consultation afterwards. And I think that with that, I actually come to the point where I can pass on to Segundo.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here and to briefly review what we are doing. As mentioned by Patrick, we are preparing this baseline analysis and then a proposal of the methodology for the new way forward. Could you please pass the slide to the next one? Okay, so in this work, we are working together with my colleague Guido Mosquera, who's in the meeting as well. I don't know if Guido can switch on his camera. So Guido and myself are the core team that are doing this baseline analysis, and we have other colleagues also who are supporting our work. Basically, what we are doing are two things. First, we have already engaged into this external independent analysis of the experience in the first planning cycle and the application of the TDA SAP approach. So far, we have compiled and reviewed baseline information. We have reviewed the documents from the first iteration of the TDA SAP. Also, we have gathered information about what's going on at the moment, and we are also contrasting what is available with the methodology, with the actual TDA SAP approach. And that is already finished. So we have already compiled our baseline information. And we have already started some semi-structured in-depth interviews with key persons. And basically what we are doing is to try to build or reconstruct the story. So we are looking or interviewing persons who were related to the TDA SAP development, that's the previous planning cycle, the SAP implementation, the structuring of the governance system, and also the new planning cycle. We have already interviewed some persons, and we hope to have more interviews in the following couple of weeks. So an email already has been sent to some key persons for interviews and to schedule them over the following weeks. And with that, based on the review of the baseline information and the interviews, we are going to draw lessons from the process and also undertake a SWOT analysis for the new planning cycle, 25, where we are, and what might needs to be adjusted. The second part of the work will be to prepare a proposal of this, as it's called, a new way forward, which basically will be a proposal of a conceptual model for the planning cycle and for the analysis, and an adjusted TDA SAP methodology that links the SOMI, which is an equivalent of the TDA, basically the situation analysis, that for the region, which has two large marine ecosystems, has various building blocks, and then also the marine data and information infrastructure that is supposed to feed into this situation analysis to be more streamlined and to be more efficient in terms of resources and time, and finally to the methodology for the, whatever you want to call it, ocean, blue economy, or whatever, planning, or the new plan, which might be an overarching plan, which is equivalent to the SAP. So that's what we have done so far and what we are planning to do in the following weeks. Could you please move to the following slide, please? Okay. Okay, so basically what we need is, in this particular meeting, we need, on the one hand, some inputs, on the other, also we will need to get some feedback once we have results. So for inputs, as mentioned before, we have started to interview some persons, and we hope to be able to interview some of the members of the working groups. In particularly, we will work with all working groups, but taking into account that Lucy will be dealing mostly with the MDI working group. So we will work with the SOMI group, with the SAB group, and also with the youth and gender group mainly. And we will coordinate with Lucy her work with the MDI. So we will request in the following days probably some interviews with some of you. And in terms of feedback, once we have an idea and a proposal, which is still in a draft form, we will certainly like to be able to present them to you and get feedback so that you can give us your thoughts about what's being proposed and help us to adjust it so that once it's already adjusted and ready, can be submitted to the upper levels of the structure. So that's all from my side, and I will wait for the end of the presentation if you have any questions. Over.
Patrick?
Patrick, you're muted.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Correct, yeah. So yes, I was a bit in doubt as to whether we would allow questions after each block, but I think as we already going with the flow now, I would suggest that Lucy continues. It's relatively short, just a few slides, I believe. And then we can actually go back, and whether there's questions with regard to what I presented or what Lucy or Segundo presented, then we can actually use all the remaining time for any questions you may have. So I would say, Lucy, please go ahead.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Segundo. So my name is Lucy Scott. I'm based in South Africa. I have a background in ichthyology and large marine ecosystems in various regions, as well as most recently with the IOC of UNESCO. So in support of the OCM work program, I'll be concerned with the marine data infrastructure baseline analysis. Next slide, please. So this will involve reviewing and analyzing existing platforms, tools, and initiatives across the region, involving a desk review as well as stakeholder consultations. SWOT analysis to identify gaps, overlaps, and opportunities. And then defining the objectives and the scope of the blueprint with stakeholder input, as well as gathering feedback from OCM working groups, member countries, and the wider ocean community. So this will certainly involve gathering feedback from working groups, mainly the MDI and SOMI working groups. Next slide, please. As part of this activity, I'll also be assessing what countries and the region and the OCM actually need from an online OCM knowledge hub. So what will the niche be that this knowledge hub will meet? Because it cannot be all things to all people. It needs to fulfill a certain specific role. So to get there, we'll also be reviewing what platforms already exist, evaluate their suitability and complementarity, look at recommendations and an implementation plan for the hub, covering its purpose, content, and functions, and consider long-term sustainability from the outset. Again, this will involve seeking inputs throughout the process and feedback from working groups, the executive and steering groups. In terms of the working groups, this would mainly be the MDI working group, and then again, the steering and executive groups. Next slide, please. And then with respect to the development of the SOMI approach, this will build on Segundo's work. Next slide, please. Segundo's work with the TDA SAP approach and will result in a detailed, fine-tuned approach to the SOMI. This will build on, embrace, and strengthen existing marine and blue economy or blue sustainable development assessment efforts with the long-term aspirations for the SOMI assessments. And as Patrick mentioned, the SOCAR assessments will be a critical building block to this. Again, this will build on Segundo's work with the TDA and SAP and will require inputs and feedback from working groups, mainly the SOMI working group, and then also again the executive group and steering group. Next slide, please. So thank you very much. This has been a brief summary, briefing session. We'll contact you within the next few weeks, and we'd be happy to take any burning questions right now. I think, as was already mentioned, the recording of the session will be made available in due course. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucy and Segundo. So this is part of the effort we are undertaking currently to keep OCM members informed about what's going on. This was zooming in a little bit on the work that will be undertaken by Segundo and Lucy, but we have also prepared a more in-depth debriefing for the OCM on what has been undertaken in the past few months and what's on the schedule for this year. That PowerPoint is currently under translation and will also be disseminated probably next week to all OCM members. We had scheduled about 45 minutes, I believe, for today's session, so we would have some 15 minutes that we can make good use of if participants want to actually ask questions, make comments on what was presented. So the floor would now be to participants, and we would be looking out for any raised hands. And of course, we would recommend that you make good use of this opportunity to bring forward any doubts, questions, or suggestions you may have. Tricia.
Thank you, Patrick. I actually had a question. Well, I think it's probably for both Segundo and for Lucy, whether or not they were thinking of liaising with the wider communities in the various countries. So looking at NGOs or other non-state actors, academic institutions, in developing the work. I know for us, we have a few persons who would have benefited from the small grants program that was under the project and who have been doing quite a bit of work in marine conservation. And I think getting their input and buy-in would be useful. So I was just wondering if that was intended. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. Please, Segundo, Lucy.
Yes, I would. It will be very useful if you can share those names and institutions with us, as well as the role that they have had. As mentioned before, at least for the baseline analysis, we are looking at key persons who have been directly related either to the planning process, to the implementation of the SAP, or to the governance and the new way forward, the new planning process. So if they have been related to any of these moments, it will be quite useful to consider to link with them. So it will be quite useful if you can share the information with us. Over.
Thank you, Segundo. I think it's like a general comment, right? So go ahead, Tricia. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to agree absolutely. I think the first level of engagement would be through the working groups, but then certainly we would like to be informed of other stakeholders and other groups that would be able to make a contribution to this activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Maybe what I can still quickly add from this perspective, I mean, Tricia, you've been with us, and with us I mean like the CLME Plus, ProCaribe Plus series of projects for quite a while. You may recall that the first SAP, as we developed it, the inputs into the SAP mostly came from governments and intergovernmental organizations. And then when we actually endorsed the SAP, there were some comments from civil society that said, well, where are we in the SAP? And because of that, under CLME Plus, then we provided the opportunity for Canary to actually support the development of a civil society version of the SAP. So if we think OCM, Ocean Coordination Mechanism, membership is generally not NGOs or civil society, it's generally governments and IGOs. But we do have the question. So this is something that Segundo would be looking into. When we did the first SAP, we did this governmental SAP, and then we did a civil society SAP. What are now the lessons learned from this? How should we do it now this time? What is the role for the different sectors of society in developing the SAP? So I think the point you brought forward is very relevant. And it would probably be good indeed that at least we can hear the voices from some of the civil society representatives in terms of how they see this and what is their role in the development and implementation of these region-wide holistic planning instruments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly if we can also include some academic institutions, the Center of Excellence for Oceanography and the Blue Economy at the University of the West Indies Five Islands campus, I think they would have a critical role to play, particularly as we talk about data and information, and they start rolling out more and more programs. I think they could hopefully not only benefit but contribute. So I think getting their voices is going to be critical.
Exactly. Thank you very much. And that's a bit the idea. I mean, if you look at the rationale behind the blueprint for the MDI, for the marine data infrastructure, we've seen that each time that new projects come into the region, they very often try to set up new platforms to the detriment of prior efforts. So if we have institutions that have been established that are recognized by countries or by IGOs to potentially play an important role in that, it would be important that they get captured in that blueprint so that instead of all the time trying to set up new platforms, we can continue to strengthen what already exists. So that's part of what we would be trying to achieve. And in that sense, we do count on our stakeholders to make sure that we don't overlook any of these initiatives that should be given a really good chance towards the future. Can I look if there would be any additional hands raised at this point? Thank you very much, Tricia, for engaging in the discussion here.
Of course, you're welcome.
Angelica, I'm not sure if you can help me identifying if anybody else has a question at this point.
Susana Pereira.
Hi, morning. I hope you can hear me. Okay, no, it's just a comment and brief comment on the highlight the opportunity of the SOCAR and its integration in the SOME process, in particular for the contracting parties of the Cartagena Convention, and how both SOCAR and SOME will provide the contracting parties and the OCM member countries and organizations with an understanding of the state of the marine and coastal environment, and of course how this will support the decision-making processes of both the Cartagena Convention and of course the OCM, and also, well, of course, wanted to appreciate the support that is being provided by the ProCaribe Plus project with the development of the SOCAR, and of course the support of our colleagues Segundo and Lucy will be also providing. And also wanted to mention that we hope that the contracting parties of the Cartagena Convention will see merit in have the two meetings back to back in August. So we didn't hear from them yesterday, but we'll do some other approaches to see if this is if they see value on having these two meetings together. So we hope that we can do this, and yeah, looking forward to work together with the OCM and our colleagues here at the meeting. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Susanna, and I think we also look forward to continue to work together with you. I'm not sure if there would be any reaction from Segundo or Lucy, or if there are further reactions from the public. No. Maybe, I mean, we would have some, if we would close within 4 minutes, we would be closing exactly within the program time. I might want to check on a few things with some of the participants. I see, for example, that we have Mark Odover on the call. One interesting aspect when we developed the first iteration of the TDA SAP in the region is that actually that process was steered through a JEF-funded project. And typically, the JEF says, for participation in your activities, you can finance JEF-eligible countries, but you cannot finance the non-JEF-eligible countries. And there we face this challenge. I mean, on one hand, they're promoting the ecosystem approach, but on the other hand, if you want to embrace the ecosystem approach, you have to invite all countries to participate and not just the JEF-eligible ones. So I just wanted to flag this. This will definitely also be an issue that our consultants will be looking into. You know, Mark, that I think we've managed to successfully overcome that challenge in the context of the OCM. We have had some leeway from the JEF to involve you and I mean to even financially support you in the activities there. But this is just like what we would be looking for. And then in your particular case, Mark, you have a double hat. You're the chair of UNESCO, IOC UNESCO, IOCARIBA, sorry, is an OCM member. We do want the alignment with the strategies, with the work programs, with the decade, etc. And on the other hand, you're a representative of one of the overseas territories. So we do see a double stake and also being able to pick your brain and to get some inputs from you. And then I see Karim is on the call. We know that the CARICOM Secretariat is fully in the development of a CARICOM Ocean strategy. There's also the question there, how does this now relate to the SAP? Is there duplication there? Is there opportunities for synergies? How can they complement each other, et cetera, et cetera? So actually, if we look at the stakeholders on the call, we actually are very interested in hearing from you so that we can ensure that we undertake this process in the best possible way. I'm not sure, Karim or Mark, if you would have any immediate comments on that, or if not, we would be looking forward to also engage with you later on during this process. I think we would have no further immediate reactions. That being the case, I think we can close this call. Again, if you have information that you would want to share with us, the email addresses of the consultants are still on the screen, I believe. And we would be looking forward to working with you and then we see each other in due time, either through bilateral contacts or when we have the meetings of the working group, the executive group of the steering group a little bit later this year. Thank you very much. I do see there is something in the chat. I hadn't been looking at the chat. Okay. Yes, thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody, and wishing you a nice weekend and looking forward to working with you.
Bye. Thank you.
And see some of you next week for our project board meeting of OCARIBA Plus.
Yes, see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.